My name is James Kenny. I lead the enterprise team at Nutanix in the UK. I'm part of your international all-male cast today, presenting. Before today, apart from this man here, who's heard of Nutanix? Oh, I'm impressed. Because we've got a stealth marketing team at Nutanix, and obviously they've excelled themselves. They're doing a good job. So I'm going to be probably about 7 or 8 minutes, not very long at all. You'd be pleased to hear. I'll just move on with the show. So before I talk to you about Nutanix and who we are and so on and so forth, I thought I'd set the scene on why we exist. So if we look at the public cloud reset customers, users' expectations on what they should be expecting. They're looking for, rightly, better ease of use, fractional consumption, ease of scale, and agility. And that's what public cloud delivers in many, many instances. But what we see at Nutanix is that sometimes that comes at a real cost. So if we look at kind of the 80-20 rule, most customers' workloads are that 80% that are running day in, day out, and are actually an awful lot more cost-effective to run on premise. So it would be, analogy we've probably heard of before, is it would be a bit like me hiring a car from Hertz to do my daily commute. I wouldn't dream of doing that because it would be really expensive. I'd buy or lease a car to do that. What we're trying to do at Nutanix is we're trying to deliver these public cloud-like attributes for your on-premise workloads, but also enable you to span in and out of public cloud. You can see here, and we're delivering that, the formatting has kind of gone a bit skew with, we're delivering that at a much lower cost profile than what you'd have in your traditional workloads and your public cloud workloads. So what do we do? So a traditional data center would be comprised of server, network, and storage, what we would call 3-tier technology platforms. And that was prevalent for many, many years. Nutanix pioneered the development of hyper-converged infrastructure, HCI. And what HCI does is it delivers a data and compute plane across commodity x86 servers. So you're getting the same type of experience, but across a lower cost profile of hardware, which is an awful lot easier to use. So with, for example, Nutanix as a software platform, we have the ability to deliver that public cloud-like experience, but on-prem or off-prem. So all of your workloads can reside in a Nutanix platform, whether they're database, whether they're VDI, or whether they're general virtual workloads. And like I said, they can run on-premise or in the public cloud or within your MSP or service provider. And I know Jigsaw 24 bringing out a service, which they'll talk about, no doubt, a little bit later on today. So what makes us different? Some of what makes us different is the fact that we offer so much choice in how we enable our customers to consume our technology. So firstly, we offer choice around the hypervisor. So many customers would be using Hyper-V or more so VMware. So we also have our own hypervisor built into the product at no extra charge. And nearly 60% of our customers are using that nowadays. Also, we are agnostic in relation to how customers platform our software on all of the main platforms that you can see there. And our software can not only run on your on-premise hardware, but it can also run in the public cloud, as well as, like I said, in your service providers like Jigsaw 24. So the beauty of that is you can encapsulate a Nutanix workload, today in AWS, for example, and you can move that workload onto your AWS site or your on-premise site depending on your profile, you might do that for business continuity or DR. You might do that to spin up a new workload where you don't currently have hardware on site. Or you might do that to facilitate a migration. An interesting comment on the public cloud, and we're big users of the public cloud ourselves. We use Workday, we use Salesforce, we use software as a service. We use all the public clouds that probably all of you use. So we're not against public cloud in any way. But like I mentioned, the public cloud could be incredibly expensive. So one of our clients, not a media client, but one of the world's largest pharmaceutical companies, is a Nutanix customer, one of the biggest in the region I lead. And their stated platform of choice is Microsoft Azure. And for 2 years, their default is everything goes into Azure. But they continue to be our biggest Nutanix customer in our region. Why is that? Because what they're trying to do is they're trying to move their legacy workloads into Azure. And that requires a lot of effort sometimes. So they need to refactor those workloads, they need to provision and test them. In 18 months, and this is a big company, I'll ask the audience, how many workloads, how many virtual machines do you think this mega pharmaceutical company moved into Microsoft Azure? 18 months. Name a number, any number. Hundreds? Bit lower.
5.
Bit lower.
2.
Yes. So the dream of the public cloud and the reality are not necessarily always aligned. Now, their stated destination is Azure. What I've mentioned that we currently have by way of facility for AWS is coming to Azure later on in the year. So if they wanted to, they could take their Nutanix workloads from on-prem and then just move them into Azure if they want to use the Azure infrastructure as a service facility. And by the way, it would be at a lower cost because they'd be paying less for the Azure service because they wouldn't have to buy all the platform services from Azure. And then we have different ways of acquiring Nutanix. So like I mentioned, we are a software. We often sell the appliance, so that's the hardware that goes with it, purely as a pass-through. The business, none of the sales teams get paid on that, but that facilitates an easy transaction for our customers. We sell term licenses between 1 and 5 years, and we work with various capacity on demand models from our kind of OEM vendors. What we like to do is work with our customers to really understand your requirements at a technical level, but also at a business level. So within our team, we have 3 what we call cloud economists, a grand title, I know, and they are accredited accountants by trade, and they will work with our customers to build a comparison of what you're looking to do with your legacy 3-tier or a Nutanix platform or public cloud, and they will build a business case to help you understand what your TCO will be. And then you can make your decision on how you'd like to move forward. So just then a little bit on us as a corporate. We're 12 years old. We're about the size of M&S by way of revenues as a reference point, M&S being Marks and Spencer's, just to keep it real. We've got about 6,500 staff. There's a few points here that stand out. We're the market leader in what we do by Gartner and Forrester, but the most important one for me is this one here. So you're probably familiar with Net Promoter Score. It goes from -100 to +100. And it's kind of our IMDb rating, if you like, in the media world. A traditional vendor would probably be in the 30s. We're in the 90s, and we have been consistently so for over 7 years. So how does that happen, and what does that mean? So first of all, the technology just works. It's really easy to install and use and grow. And when we do have a problem, because everyone has problems, we only employ level 3 customer service engineers. So when you're dealing with an adult who can help you get to a fix really, really quickly. So I was going to say one last thing. So look, we love the partnership with Jigsaw 24, and we love the partnership with Avid. So what we have at Nutanix is a great product, but undeniably we don't have the kind of depth of understanding of your market like Jigsaw and Avid. We've got a number of joint customers, which I think are going to be mentioned later on. And we pioneered the HCI certification with Avid. So, thank you for that. So that gives us a step in ahead of our competition into this space to help customers get a really great cloud-like experience, like I said, whether that's on-premise or whether you choose to run your software off-premise. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Sorry again and apologies for having to present remotely. We didn't sort of really intend to kind of get you all there to have some content delivered by Zoom, but needs must, and we'll just have to kind of make the best of it. So good evening, everyone. I'm Graham McGuinness. I work with the Solutions Architect team at Jigsaw, and we're sort of delighted to be sort of partnering with Nutanix. And I'm sort of going to be picking up really at a slightly different tangent where James left off. But really, it's just about kind of understanding more the wider landscape and why, we're so interested, and why Nutanix is so interesting as a platform sort of for us. So as you well know, virtualization is pretty established in the enterprise. It's kind of less ubiquitous in our sort of vertical. In M&E, there's this perception that really, the workloads that we sort of engage in are sort of, the lifting is far too heavy for mere virtual machines. But virtualization as a practice in the M&E sector has been with us for many years, and has been really a part of the landscape. What has changed, though, is just the more sort of common nature of it, and also the workloads that are being virtualized have also sort of subsequently changed. But as James alluded to, or as you saw in the earlier slides, I think the challenge that we sort of really have with virtualization is that it was perceived as being pretty difficult. And, we were sort of really sitting with the basis of sort of what we sort of lovingly call the 3-tier architecture. But as we saw in earlier slides, this really is about sort of separate servers that host the virtual machines. You've got the processing sort of layer sitting under them. They're then connected into a storage sort of network, or a network sort of fabric, as represented by those rather sort of unrepresentative sort of blocks down below. And finally, right at the bottom, you've got the shared storage. And working in this environment and sort of building on top of it was not a straightforward proposition. It was sort of fairly intractable to provision. You needed a pretty high level of expertise, and you had a bunch of other problems that you had to deal with. And when we used to go, and we've been in the virtualization game with Avid for probably around 5 years. And when we would go and enthusiastically talk to customers about why it was great to virtualize their media composer workloads, they kind of would look at the price point and the layer of difficulty, or the level of difficulty rather, that this was coming in at, and would kind of shake their heads. It just didn't kind of stack up. And the real problem, fundamentally, was the fact that not only was it sort of fairly difficult to sort of deliver as a solution for the company, but, expanding your environment out was not simple either. You needed a high level of expertise in-house to make that happen, or you had to effectively, get consultants in. And, as they sort of say, not only in Facebook, it's complicated. You have to sort of do all sorts of pretty deep planning to kind of, get your environments upgraded. And, there was also this sort of pretty real perception that for smaller companies, it just wasn't really all it. And, the pain of having to sort of buy all of this, stand it all up, and then find in a few months' time you've reached capacity and you've got this headache about how to expand it while your clients are busy, is sort of a massive problem. And, this is sort of, it's been a sea change, for us in terms of sort of understanding, how we can make this work for customers. Hitherto, we were pretty clear that virtualization was a route that we needed to go down, and that it was definitely a route that would be of massive advantage to our customers. But it was just problematic. It was expensive, difficult, not sort of easy to go around, difficult to just kind of generally manage and to build a business case around and to fundamentally make money out of. So again, as we saw sort of earlier, HCI or hyperconverged infrastructure was really the key to unlocking this. And we sort of can't really stress enough how important this notion of scaling is to kind of going forward in your world. Typically, when you're building out an environment, you don't know potentially how busy it's going to get. And again, this alluding to the old way of building sort of virtual infrastructure environments where you had to basically stack up and provision for peak usage, try and figure out how busy your environment would get, and then effectively build an environment that would work to that was pretty painful. And it is truly a completely refreshing approach in order to sort of build your cluster environment on top of the sort of hyper-converged sort of hardware environment, and the layer of intelligence that the Nutanix sort of software sort of brings to this. So hyper-convergence, it's basically a very fancy word for an all-in-one. But again, as we saw earlier, and we're revisiting this because the importance of these building blocks sort of really cannot be overstated. And equally, and we're not really going to visit a lot of this today, the intelligence that resides in the software that governs the cluster environment. It basically has sort of grown from the hyperscale sort of vision that Nutanix had, and it basically pervades, all of the design and approach philosophies that the company has. So we've got these building blocks, and really this is what we're looking at in terms of a very basic sort of design, or really a conceptual overview that allows you to sort of understand what is going on. So we've got our nodes or clusters that are a shared resource. We've got the storage united into a single storage pool. We use a network fabric to effectively bind these units together. And we are then in a position to have something which is flexible, scalable, it's software defined, and it provides us a really very different view on how we go forward with our virtualization journey. So the scaling thing, I keep on going on about it, but it's incredibly important because when the time comes to add more capacity to your environment, you can scale linearly, and you can scale linearly while you're in production. The environment is sort of, modern in the sense that it understands you can't shut your world down in order to kind of add more sort of compute environments. It's also hardware agnostic. And, it just means that it opens up, as we heard earlier, there are, many different ways to sort of approach this. And it is, fundamentally a different way of looking at the challenge of virtualization and, how you want to sort of go down that route. So the other aspect of Nutanix that is a more of a philosophical sort of approach really is its ease of use. And, there is no exaggeration in terms of the simplification of just standard tasks in a virtual environment and allowing you to work on them with staff that are not highly paid IT experts. And, as again, it was alluded to earlier, when there are issues around needing support and, help with this, it is at hand and it's incredibly highly regarded. So really one of the key approaches really is just this whole notion of basically being able to focus your energies on what you're doing for your clients and customers, and focus on your applications. Don't focus on effectively your server infrastructure. And I've stuck a little snapshot in of our sort of demo environment here in progress, which as a simple dashboard gives you an instant understanding as to kind of what's kind of going on, what is happening on the cluster. Admittedly, not a huge amount at this point in time when I took the snapshot, but nevertheless, it's this simple, clear understanding and approach is something that sort of, is sort of throughout the entire sort of design of the of their world. So a big deal for us equally was sort of Avid's endorsement of Nutanix as a virtualization platform. Before, we had the option of looking at another vendor. We could only really work with VMware, and it was a challenge for all the reasons outlined earlier. And we haven't even sort of got into the detail of it with regards to kind of licensing and all the rest, but it just simply gave us another option to look at, and one that was incredibly interesting. And if you are sort of embedded in the sort of VMware world, you can move those workloads into Nutanix, and you can move your licensing, and you can stick with what but just put it into a hyper-converged world, which kind of makes it a lot easier and a lot sort of better for you in the longer term. So I digress for a second, and I'm equally painfully aware that I'm kind of the guy that is standing between yourselves and a cold beer from the fridge. So I'll try not to sort of digress too much. But really, in terms of sort of how we sort of build out these environments, we're going to sort of try and let you understand what a basic sort of stack looks like. And while this sort of diagram is pretty simple, it hopefully tries to encapsulate all the core elements that we're talking about here. So over on the left-hand side of the diagram, we've got our Nexus storage sort of underpinning, or any real-time storage vendor that is certified with the applications you want to work with is, network attached storage. We hook it into the back-end network. We've got our Nutanix cluster. We've got the core switching, and then we've got our pool of edit clients as virtual machines. And really, we've just outlined here that you run the creative application of your choice. So we've got our Windows VMs. We equally have been leveraging a lot of Lucid Link in our workflows. We've got that connecting into the VMs, which kind of mounts effectively S3 backed storage as a local drive. It's a real facilitation tool and has expanded people's horizons kind of dramatically in terms of, managing workloads. And last but not least, on the right-hand side are the packages that we use to engage with the virtual environment itself. So we've got, Amulet Zero clients, we've got sort of Teradici, LeoStream, Security Gateway, and Broker, which has just been kind of amazing in terms of sort of facilitating pretty complicated access control workflows for us. And Streambox in terms of getting a high quality video output. Obviously, one of the big problems with virtual machines is that there's no video I/O spigot. And for a lot of customers, really the key thing for them is moving what is effectively the offline or predator, as it's increasingly used as a phrase, the producer editor, moving these workloads off physical machines and the whole maintenance sort of environment that sort of spawns and effectively loads onto the facility or teams managing the environment. So with that really is an overview or a snapshot in terms of sort of what we're looking at and what we've been doing with a number of folks. The other aspect to kind of really get interested and excited about is your whole approach to working with your desktop machines. Building templates, you can spend a lot of time crafting different templates in different sizes, which will have different amounts of memory, numbers of vCPUs, and so forth. Those templates can be refined, updated, tweaked, and then used as base elements that you just deploy again and again. And it is just, once you get into managing your virtual environment, it's a completely different view on what used to be a bit of a penance, quite frankly. And the ability to quickly deploy either via some automated options or just with a couple of clicks, a new machine that's ready to go instantly, that just needs to be kind of licensed, and then away you go, is pretty amazing. And it really, I think, for us in terms of working with our customers, it's completely transformed their view in terms of sort of how this is done and how this should be done, really. So we're getting to the kind of the end of my blethering, you'll be pleased to hear. But, the one thing we just equally wanted to emphasize here was that, it's not just editorial. As we sort of saw earlier, there are, an incredibly diverse number of workloads that Nutanix sort of quite happily handles and works through, and all of the sort of goodness around, the underlying platform and its sort of foundations that allow you to sort of do what you need to do is sort of one of the key takeaways here. And forgive us, if we're kind of constantly just trying to reinforce the basics here rather than, get, down and deep into the guts of sort of, the hypervisor. But we just really felt it was key to allow people to kind of understand how fundamental a change the ability to use these building blocks sort of really is for our vertical. So, really, this is not a science project. We've got a number of folks using and running this today in production, in anger. And equally, as was mentioned earlier, virtualization, also the Nutanix platform in particular, allows you to kind of, move workloads into the cloud using sort of pretty, using relatively straightforward approaches, but allowing you to kind of keep that linkage into the environment that you're already familiar with. And, again, one of the fundamentals of sort of Nutanix is this notion of your effort should be able to be direct to, helping your customers and improving your productions and your work, not looking after your sort of infrastructure. And it's really this approach that has been, quite honestly, an incredibly sort of refreshing sort of, view on how sort of stuff should be done. So I'm really going to kind of wrap up here, and there'll be lots of folks around to sort of take your questions. As you heard, there are several ways to sort of get into the Nutanix world, and really we'd love to sort of discuss your sort of thoughts around that and how we can help you do that. And again, thank you for your time, and I'm really sorry I can't be with you this evening. Thank you very much.